you worked your way up in management, and you became assistant foreman. We'll get into that more later, but
twice.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, because you were laid off.
Yes, I did it twice. Yes.
You're also around for the strikes too, which I want.
Yes, I was. I was around for what they call the big strike today.
I
didn't know it at that time, but it was a big strike. It was a big strike.
Was there any strikes around the time that you were getting hired?
No, there was only the threat of strike. And I learned later on from John J. Delury that the tool of the union is the threat, not the strike itself.
Because we lose power over this.
Once you strike and people find out that they have all their fingers and toes, the attitude changes. Says, you know what, the hell with them.
Yeah.
And people steel themselves to it. We witnessed it in the transit strikes of 1966 with the wonderful Michael J. Quill, another great labor leader here in New York City. You know, it's a shame that these men, for everything they did for so many of us, and how they're almost all but forgotten.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, and a lot of people walking along, living in suburbia.
Well, unfortunately, we don't name bridges after these guys.
No, you name them after guys who tried to take away our pay and our benefits.
Yeah.
And well, what can I say? I don't know. But anyway, yes, I was around for the strike in 1968, and we struck for $25 a year. That was the variation. The city of New York offered us $400, and we wanted $425, and it became a battle. And what happened?
$400
a year.
Wow.
$400 a year, and it became a big battle. And Mr. Delury, in his wisdom, wanted every sanitation worker to report to City Hall the next morning. Don't go to the job. Don't go to the section. Don't go to the garage. And he was going to have the rally where the men were going to go around City Hall, 10,000 men, go around City Hall. And that happened. And I believe that it was not his intent to have a strike. That's my personal opinion. I was right there. I was 25 feet from him when he was up on the rostrum, and he gave the word, everybody go back to the location.
Right.
And guys started yelling, no.
They wanted to go against him.
They wanted to go, and so they pulled him down, or they tried to pull him down from the rostrum, which was, I remember exactly where it was across from 253 Broadway. Mm-hmm. And more than 30 years later, I had my office in 253 Broadway, and I used to look out the window from my office right at that spot. And as people were walking, I said, nobody knows.
Yeah.
They're just going by like that. And there's a million spots like that in the world, I mean, but this particular spot. And finally he relented, and we were on strike. And I walked with him, another guy by the name of Carmine Basile, who I worked with, and he was walking with a guy called Mickey DiTore, who was known as Mickey Mouse at the union, and 5 or 6 other guys, Joey Rastelli, and we're all walking back to Cliff Street. Mm-hmm. And he was saying repeatedly that he didn't want to strike. He didn't want to strike. He didn't want to strike. But he had it, and when the old man had it, I don't think anybody could have done better. As you know, the mayor had him arrested, and he was put in the debtor's prison on 37th Street.
Is that in the 60s?
Yes, 1968.
Wow.
He was put in the debtor's prison on the 37th Street, which is now gone. That was between 9th Avenue and 10th Avenue.
Why did they put him in prison?
In violation of all kinds of laws that he had instigated the strike.
Oh, so there were Taylor laws even back then?
Yeah, it wasn't called Taylor law. It was something else, another law. And I think I've given you quite many photographs from when he was arrested
absolutely.
and when he's in prison. But it was a different world then. Every labor leader and his brother and sister immediately went to 37th Street with as many people as they could bring, and they stood outside and kept a vigil 24 hours. Albert Shanker, president of the United Teachers Federation here in New York City, which is now, I think, Randy
Weingarten?
Yeah. In fact, Albert Shanker was a very militant guy. In one of Woody Allen's movies, I think it's in the one where he gets lost in time. Well, anyway, he says that everything
Sleepers?
changed. Yeah, everything changed when a man named Albert Shanker got a hold of a hydrogen bomb. He used it. So just to give you an idea about Al Shanker.
I can't believe this. My doctor said I'd be up and on my feet in 5 days. He was off by 199 years.
I know it's hard, Miles, but try to think of this experience as a miracle of science.
To me, a miracle of science is I go into the hospital for a minor operation. I come out the next day. My rent isn't 2,000 months overdue. That's a miracle of science. This is what I call a cosmic screwing. And where am I, anyhow? I mean, what happened to everybody? Where are all my friends?
You must understand that everyone you knew in the past has been dead nearly 200 years.
But they all ate organic rice.
You are now in the year 2173. Now, this is the central parallel of the American Federation. This district is what you probably call the southwestern United States. That was before it was destroyed by the war.
War?
Yes, according to history, over 100 years ago, a man named Albert Shanker got a hold of a nuclear warhead.
I can't think of the names now, but if you look at that photograph, the names will come to me.
Right.
Anyway, all of the people that were leading labor here in New York City, certainly the transit union and so many others, the police union, rallied around Mr. Delury that it was wrong, just wrong, that a person gets locked up because he has a disagreement with his employer over wages and benefits.
Right.
That it was wrong. It can't be correct. Can you lock up the employer because he won't pay you what you ask him?
Right. Well, it was all designed to scare labor.
Well, yes, but if a principle or if a social theory is true, then to my mind it's got to be true in both directions.
Right.
Why is it that you can lock me up and I can't lock you up? I guess the answer is because you're preventing a service, a vital city service. So they probably used that, and he was arrested, and he stayed in jail.
How long was he in jail for?
Several days at least, maybe a week.
Meanwhile,
maybe
everybody's
longer.
parked outside waiting for something to happen.
And we're all on strike.
Wow.
And no garbage is being collected all over the city. Fortunately, it was in February, and it was very, very cold out. So that was big help.
Wow,
but
imagine if there was a snowstorm.
There was a snowstorm, but it was a very minor one. It happened on Saturday night, which I would think would be probably the 16th of February.
Wow.
It was very mild, and the city got by. The other issue, there's a whole other story to that too, but I don't want to get into that part. Anyway, Mr. Lindsay wanted the National Guard to be used to pick up garbage, and the governor, Nelson Rockefeller, who had an affinity for Mr. Delury, to be sure, he was quoted in all the newspapers, and it made Lindsay look terrible. He said, "We don't pick up garbage with bayonets here in New York," and he made Lindsay look like a jackass.
Right.
And they never were really friendly after that.
Right.
And so the governor worked out a deal where we would get the other $25. And Lindsay disavowed himself of the deal, and he said that the governor caved in to the forces of labor and blah, blah, blah. And Lindsay was intending to run to be president of the United States.
Right.
So was Nelson Rockefeller. They
Right.
both wanted to be president of the United States, and that happens once in a while here in New York City. It happened with Christy Whitman and Rudolph Giuliani.
Yes.
They went through the same process, both wanting to be president of the United States. Anyway, long story short, the strike ended, and we resumed on a Saturday night to pick up. And at least in my neighborhood where I worked in the South Bronx, when we came on the street, the people were clapping in the street.
Wow.
That's the kind of support that we had. And throughout my career, I tried to impress on the supervisors, district supers, borough supers, and sanitation workers that the best ally we have is the public. And the more that we do to the benefit of the public, the better off that all of us will be. Not just sanitation men, not just bosses.
Yeah.
The better off all of us will be. When we spill something at a spot, at a site, and just keep going and think it's funny, it's not funny. It's stupid.
Yeah, because you're pissing off the public, the people that are going to back
right.
us. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Right.
And that's the whole story.
Yeah.
And so anyway, and there was a big difference between that strike and the second strike, which only happened like 7 years later. The entire perception of the Department of Sanitation by the public had changed. Mm-hmm. And
what was it like when Delury actually left the prison? He came outside. Did he address the men?
He addressed everybody there briefly, and then he got in the car with several other people.
What did he say when he left?
He said something derogatory about Mayor Lindsay. Mm-hmm. I can't quote it right now, but he said something about Mayor Lindsay because, he was in competition against Michael Quill, when the reporter asked Michael Quill what did he think of the judge's decision, Michael Quill said the judge could drop dead in his black robes for all I care. He says this union won't be muscled or harassed or bullied into anything except what the members
And who was
want.
Michael Quill?
Michael Quill was the president of the Transport Workers Union here in New York City.
Wow.
Had the big strike in 1966.
And he supported us on our strike when we...
100%.
Wow.
100%.
And
we supported him.
Yeah.
And when we all went down to Memphis, Tennessee, to support the sanitation workers in Memphis.
Is that where Martin Luther King
Yes,
got shot?
Martin Luther King changed his schedule to return to Memphis to back up the sanitation workers.
In Memphis.
Yes.
And New York City sanitation workers went down there?
Oh, busloads.
Wow.
We went down there before he was killed.
Wow.
We went down there to support the men because they saw our strike in February, and that gave them the courage to strike, and their conditions were horrendous compared to ours.
Yeah.
Terrible.
Did you hear Martin Luther King speak?
No, I did not. I didn't see him, nor did I hear him.
Wow.
We just went down to support them, to march with them.
Uh-huh.
And he got killed supporting sanitation workers. A little known fact among sanitation workers.
Yeah, I didn't realize that until just recently.
You can go on the internet and see all of that. He had been there supporting them. Their strike went on for months. He had been there to support them initially, and then, of course, by that time, 1968, he had an enormous schedule, 7 days a week around the clock. He was in the news every single day at that point. And
could you tell us a bit about what he did? He came down and he supported the men. What did he march with them?
He marched with them, and the initial thing about how the sanitation workers in Memphis were overwhelmingly African American,
Right.
Probably 80% or more. None of them was allowed to be in charge of a crew.
Right.
So that in itself, plus the pay was bad, the scales were bad, everything was bad. But you have to remember at that time, all the old guard was coming apart at the seams. There were protests just about everywhere, even in small towns. And it didn't matter if you were in the South or in the North or in the Midwest or the Northwest. And there was protesting everywhere. So the demand for Mr. King, Jesse Jackson, Ralph Abernathy, and Stokely Carmichael and 100 others, Malcolm X, et cetera, was enormous. And Mr. King promised the workers he would come back, and he changed his schedule, even though his advisors recommended to him not to change his schedule because it was so busy, and he decided to go there, and he was shot and killed.
Wow. And
I think that every sanitation worker should keep that in the back of their mind.
I tell you, ever since I learned about that, it has.
It's a factor.
You know, because he tried to get better pay and better conditions for sanitation workers.
And when that happened, the city of Memphis did just enormous bad publicity. Mm-hmm. That good old boys, good old rednecks, good old South didn't want it. And they immediately, they gave in. Mm-hmm. And they figured out some kind of settlement with the workers because they just didn't want that deluge of press and media all over Memphis for a long period, extended periods of time. That was what was killing them. A lot of these guys were not exposed. And what was happening now, little by little, we were peeling back the layers of what was really going on in another part of the country.
Right.
Even people who, for whatever reason, had a dislike of African Americans, even people like that came to realize, hey, that's really bad what's happening down there. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't tolerate it for 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. You know, and so there was change in the air. Mm-hmm. There was change in the air.
So what happened? He was marching with them that day, and then he spoke to them?
Yes, he made a speech there. He had made a speech the night before, too.
And then he went back to his hotel, and then...
He had stepped out on the terrace of the motel. He was in a motel.
Right.
By coincidence, it was called the Lorraine Motel.
Mm-hmm.
And some guy, not too far away with a rifle, shot him right there on the spot.
Mm-hmm. A coincidence because your wife's name is Lorraine.
Yeah. Just a coincidence.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was shot and killed there.
What was it like when you were in New York City and you heard about it when Martin Luther King passed away?
Well, there was tremendous anger among sanitation men. Because at that time, we all knew that he had supported sanitation workers. Even if you didn't go down there, certainly the union was very aware of everything that was going on down there and his support for sanitation men.
Do you know if Delury spoke to Martin Luther King at all?
I can't be sure of that.
Right.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I was just wondering. All right, so we're going to take a break and stop the show at this point. And thank you very much for joining me. I really appreciate it, having you on the show and speaking a little bit about your career. And I hope we are able to do a series of these. And thank you very much.
Thank you.